Stimate domnule profesor, distinși oaspeți, stimați membri ai Senatului, doamnelor și domnilor prorectori, decani, dragi colegi, suntem în fața unei noi ceremonii la universitatea noastră, cea din urmă de acest fel din anul universitar curent. Alma Mater Napocensis este onorată să primească între doctorii săi de suflet un nou laureat Nobel, pe profesorul Erik Maskin, de la Universitatea Harvard. Alegerea Senatului vine în urma unor excepționale contribuții în domeniul teoriei proiectării mecanismelor, în teoria contractelor, în teoria alegerii sociale, în economia politică în ansamblu. Despre asta însă se va vorbi mai pe larg în curând. Sunt cercetări de confluență și de interferență care demonstrează interdisciplinaritate, corelarea disciplinelor și optimizarea întregii vieți sociale. Alegerea vine pe urmele unor egale ai domniei sale, între care laureații Nobel, Sir Tim Hunt, Ahmed Zewail, Günther Blobel, Richard Robert Ernst, Stefan Hell, Jean-Marie Len, George Emil Parade, Mario Vargas Llosa și mulți alții care l-au precedat, i-am prezentat pe cei din urmă, și mulți alții care l-au precedat în obținerea titlului de Doctor Honoris Causa al acestei universități. Cum ne amintim cu toții, nu cu mult timp în urmă, prințul Charles al Marii Britanii a fost protagonist în această instituție la o ceremonie identică. Universitatea noastră, fondată în urmă cu aproape 4 secole și jumătate, în 1581, a evoluat de la 3 facultăți tradiționale în Europa timpului la 21 de facultăți astăzi. Și de la circa 300 de studenți cât a reușit să aibă în secolul al XVI-lea, la 42.000 de studenți în acest moment. Este o universitate unică în Europa și chiar în lume din câteva puncte de vedere. A avut foarte multe limbi de studiu în trecut, succesive, latina, maghiara, germana, din nou maghiara, apoi română, iar astăzi are, cum știți, 3 limbi de studiu locale, oficiale, româna, maghiara, germană, și câteva limbi internaționale, între care predomină engleza și franceza. Fiecare student își alege limba de studiu la înscriere. O altă particularitate se referă la cele 4 facultăți de teologie, care au institute de cercetări adiacente. Universitatea are una dintre cele mai importante grădini botanice din Europa. Are un parc sportiv de excepție, în cadrul căruia se cultivă cele mai variate sporturi. Are un institut de cercetări de prim rang, numit Institutul de Studii Avansate în Știință și Tehnologie, Institutul STAR UBB, care a fost înființat în vederea asigurării excelenței și competitivității academice internaționale a instituției noastre. Ca prestigiu, conform unor clasamente recente, UBB face parte dintre primele 3% universități ale lumii, iar în domeniul matematică, universitatea se situează pe primele 70-90 de locuri în lume în ultimii ani. O asemenea universitate, ca să fie de performanță, e obligată să îmbine tradiția cu excelența, să crească permanent exigențele față de pregătirea profesorilor și studenților și să așeze mereu în prim plan cercetarea, inovarea și creația originală. Distinse domnule profesor, prestigiul dumneavoastră este natural demn de Harvard University, pe care o reprezentați în întreaga lume, și de premiul Nobel pe care l-ați obținut în 2007 în urma unei competiții mondiale în care se întrec mii de savanți. Vă mulțumim și pentru faptul că sprijiniți Conferința anuală a economiștilor români din mediul academic din străinătate, ERMAS, inițiată în urmă cu puțini ani aici la Cluj, datorită concursului unor tineri profesori de la UBB. Prin acest sprijin, deveniți garantul tinerilor generații de cercetători și profesori care fac din meseria de economist o misiune, străduindu-se să înnobileze lumea, să o facă mai bună, mai de calitate, mai umană. Suntem profund onorați să vă dorim bun venit între membrii corpului academic al acestei universități, în care aproape 10.000 de studenți și profesori slujesc în 2 facultăți de profil, meseria de economist. Veți fi garantul profesorilor și studenților noștri de performanță, care spre a se menține la nivel superior, au nevoie de modele, precum modelul pe care îl întruchipați dumneavoastră. Prin asemenea modele, omenirea poate să iasă din oboseala ei actuală și să readucă încrederea în comunitate. Vivat, crescat, floreat! Îngăduiți-mi, distinși ascultători, conform tradiției, să-l invit pe domnul conferențiar universitar dr. Răzvan Mustață, decanul Facultății de Științe Economice și Gestiunea Afacerilor, să prezinte laudatio. Aveți cuvântul, domnule decan.
Mulțumesc. Dear Professor Erik Maskin, Professor Ioan Aurel Pop, Rector of the Babeş-Bolyai University, Professor Ioan Chirilă, President of the Babeş-Bolyai University Senate, dear guests. It is a great honor for me to write and present this laudatio. And I have to admit, it was also a difficult job. My area of expertise is the study of business. Hence, this experience was a new lesson and an amazing journey through the contribution of Professor Erik Maskin to the field of economics. However, the major difficulty in writing this laudatio is due to the temptation of putting on the paper only the following sentence. Erik Maskin, Adams professor at Harvard University, was one of the recipients of the 2007 Swedish National Bank's Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. This prize, which is commonly referred as to the Nobel Prize in Economics, was given to the Professor Maskin for having laid the foundation of mechanism design theory. To cite from Professor Gârleanu and Professor Bejan, who wrote the letters of support to our Senate, in the light of this immensely prestigious award, I find it very hard to provide meaningful additional information. However, for the next few minutes, I will try to share with a part of the audience, which is maybe as nephew as I was, what I had to read or to learn from the discussions with my game theory colleagues about the overwhelming contributions of Professor Maskin to the field of economics. Mechanism design starts from a desired outcome, which is what is given in such problems, while the unknown is the economic mechanism itself. That is, a set of incentives such that players, acting rationally and strategically, implement in equilibrium the social choice function represented by the desired outcome. Mechanism design is like reverse game theory, and it is opposing to the traditional economic theory, which is typically devoted to the analysis of the performance of a given mechanism. The 2007 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences was awarded to Leonid Hurwicz, Erik Maskin and Roger Meyerson for having laid the foundations of mechanism design theory. As pointed out by the Jürgen Weibel, chairman of Economic Prize Committee, in his presentation speech, the research of Hurwitz, Maskin and Meyerson enable economists not only to study the performance of existing economic institutions, but also to suggest how this can be improved and to identify the theoretical limits to what can be achieved when we take into account the constraints that emanate from individuals' incentives and private information. In the past decades, mechanism design theory represented the fundamental background for the applied research in many areas of economics and political science with huge practical implications: auction design, pollution control, privatization, an electoral system, etc. Of course, to find myself in a position to emphasize the contribution of Professor Erik Maskin to mechanism design theory, it's a daunting, overwhelming task, a feeling also expressed by Camelia Bejan in her letter of support to Babeş-Bolyai Senate. However, I have understood from discussions and my readings that Professor Maskin, with his mathematical rigorousness, built upon Professor Hurwitz's ideas about creating mechanisms to achieve social goals. He identified which social goals are implementable and which are the mechanisms to achieve the implementation. He established that the property known today as Maskin monotonicity was necessary and sufficient condition for the implementation of the identified social goals. See the article entitled Nash Equilibrium and Welfare Optimality, published within Review of Economic Studies in 1999. This paper represents the main motivation for a large string of subsequent studies. A vast literature on implementing theory emerged and evolved with application in several areas of economic theory, like social choice and incomplete contracts. For his research, Professor Maskin has been continuously returning to the field of game theory, a starting point and theoretical background. Nevertheless, the contribution to the field of game theory is by itself remarkable and under the auspices of excellence. In the journey through economic theory, occasioned by this laudatio, I have also learned about Fault Theorem. This asserts that any feasible and individually rational outcome can arise as equilibrium in infinitely repeated games in which players are sufficiently patient. Moreover, in repeated long-term interactions, the fear of vengeance may lead to comparison outcome that will not occur in short-term interaction. In one of his famous papers in game theory, entitled The Fault Theorem in Repeated Games with Discounting or with Incomplete Information, published within Econometrica in 1986 with Drew Fundenberg, Professor Maskin formalized the Fault Theorem. The authors gave a qualified yes to the question of whether the Fault Theorem holds with discounting. After all, agents in many games of economic interest are not completely patient. Moreover, Fundenberg and Maskin prove, in a simple or more complex approach, that any payoff which Pareto dominates and one-shot Nash equilibrium can be sustained in equilibrium of finitely repeated games with incomplete information. After all, through the theory of infinitely repeated games offered an explanation of cooperation in ongoing relationship, economic agents often have finite lives. Results like these ones mentioned before have been very influential in several fields, not only in economics. They offered insights into sensitive issues such as the sustainability of long-term contracts between countries, the type of behavior that can be sustained by social norms, etc. In addition to mechanism design, Professor Maskin has contribution to many other areas of economic theory, In auction theory, he studied the equilibrium properties for different types of auction, being interested in the efficiency of such mechanisms. In contract theory, he is credited as one of the pioneers of studying the implication of adverse selection. He also approached the field of social inequalities, being interested in the causes and emphasizing the role of education in such social phenomena. His current research focuses on the theory of coalition formation and comparison of different voting systems. Professor Maskin is actively involved in public debates on what should be the voting system, which the most efficiently promote the principle of democracy. We shall have the delight to listen to him talking about similar issues in his keynote speech at the ERMAS 2017 conference. The diversity of his contribution is advocated by the list of 127 published articles, all in top journals. Google Scholar is crediting him with an impressive number of 29,000 citations, demonstrating the huge impact of his research. He had academic positions only at top universities such as Cambridge University, MIT, Harvard University, and Princeton University. He is Fellow of the American Academy of Art and Science, corresponding Fellow of the British Academy, Fellow of the Econometric Society and President in 2003 of this society, Charter Member of the Game Theory Society and President for the period 2010-2012, and the list can continue unaccountably, pointing toward a single conclusion. The entire career of Professor Maskin is under the auspices of clarity, precision, and power of mathematical logic, used to shed light on economic and social problems to highest importance for humanity. However, no words said here can ever equalize the recognition he received from the profession as testimony of his immense contribution to the field of economics. Therefore, we, Babeş-Bolyai University, thank Erik Maskin for the honor of accepting our distinction of Doctor Honoris Causa. Thank you, Professor Erik Maskin.
În urma atâtor merite și realizări pe care domnul decan Mustață și domnul prorector Litan au încercat să le sintetizeze, Senatul Universității noastre a decis în ziua de 12 decembrie 2016 acordarea titlului de Doctor Honoris Causa profesorului Erik Maskin. În acest spirit, îngăduiți-mi să-l invit pe domnul profesor universitar, doctor Părintele Chirilă, să prezinte proclamațio.
Nos magnificus rector, clarissimus preses, nec non senatus alme matris Claudeopolitanae Universitatis Collegium, et nos economicarum scientiarum ac negotiorum administrationis facultatis decanus, prestantissimo ac doctissimo professori Erik Maskin, economicarum scientiarum artium ac scientiarum facultatis departamenti alme matris Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts Universitatis Sodali, nec non cum Leonida Hurwitz et Rogerio Merson pro economicorum mechanismatum sive ludorum incrementorum doctrina regalis Svetiae Scientiarum Academiae Nobel Premii Laureato, dum observamus suas grandis momenti in economicorum mechanismatum sive ludorum proectandorum doctrine, nec non incentiorum economice artis, ac contractum doctrine, neque variorum electoralium systematum inquisitionis campo contributiones, titulum Honoris Causa Doctoris eidem conferimus, in cuius rei fidem hoc diploma propriis manibus subscriptum et nostre universitatis Sigillio munitum ei confere curamus. Datum Claudiopoli septem calendas Augustiano Domini millesimo 17. Magnificus rector Ioannes Aurelius Romania Academiae Sodalis Pop, honoratissimus decanus Răzvan Professor Doctor Mustață, clarissimus senatus preses, reverendissimus pater Ioannes Chirila.
And now I have the honor to give the floor to Professor Erik Maskin to present his speech. Please, Professor.
Thank you so much. It's a terrific honor to be here in the beautiful city of Cluj at Babeş-Bolyai University and to now be a member of that university. It means a great deal to me. And I thought what I would do this morning is to spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about the work that I've spent a good deal of my career on, which is called mechanism design. Now, the words mechanism design probably don't mean very much to you. The dean did a nice job of explaining in a few sentences what the subject is all about, and I'll also try to give a very brief definition of mechanism design, but if you're like me, definitions don't really tell you very much. They're a little bit too abstract, they're a little bit too formal, and so what I'd really like to do is to give you a couple of examples of mechanism design. I think from the examples you will see, you will have a pretty good understanding of what we're trying to do in this field. But first, I'll make a brief attempt at a definition. So, as the dean said, you can think of mechanism design as the engineering part of economics, or even the reverse engineering part of economics. A lot of economists are interested in looking at existing economic institutions and trying to understand them, trying to predict what outcomes they will generate. And this is a very important part of economics. I would say maybe 90% of the subject is devoted to this positive or predictive part. But in mechanism design, we do just the opposite. We reverse the direction. We start with the outcomes. We start with the goals or outcomes that we would want to achieve, and then we work backwards to try to figure out, could we build institutions or mechanisms which would actually achieve those goals? And that's the part of economics that I love the most, and I hope you'll be interested in it too. So that still probably doesn't mean a great deal to you. Let's see an example. And I'll start with a very, very simple example. You might think it's too simple. It's not an important enough issue, but bear with me for a few minutes. Imagine that you're a parent, you're a mother, and you have two children, Bob and Alice, and you have a cake which you want to divide between your two children. And your goal, and this is very important, is that each child should be happy with the piece that he or she has got. So that means that Bob should think he's got at least half the cake, and Alice should think that she's got at least half the cake. If you don't achieve this goal, let me tell you from the experience in my house, you will not live happily. So that's the goal. We'll call it a fair division. And the question is, how do we achieve a fair division? Well, if you as the mother know that the children view the cake the same way that you do, there's a very simple solution. You just take a knife, you cut the cake exactly in half, you give one piece to each of the children, and because you think that you've cut the cake in half, the children will think so too. We're assuming that, and that's the end of the problem. The difficulty in practice, though, is that children almost never see things the way their parents do. So you might think that you've cut the cake exactly in half, but Bob may very well think that Alice's piece is bigger. Or Alice might think that Bob's piece is bigger. So how do you get around this problem? In mechanism design terms, you want to achieve a fair division, but you don't actually have enough information to do this on your own because you don't know how the children see the cake. And the mechanism design question is, despite this lack of information, is there a mechanism, is there a procedure that could be followed which will result in a fair division, even though the mother doesn't know in advance what a fair division even is? Well, it turns out that what I've described, this problem of dividing a cake, is actually a very old problem. It's literally thousands of years old, and if you know your Old Testament, you will recognize this as similar to the problem that Lot and Abraham faced when they wanted to divide grazing lands between them in a fair way. And just as the Bible stated the problem, it also gave a solution. And one of the interesting features of this solution is that it's extremely simple, but very, very clever. And that's a hallmark of mechanisms in this field of mechanism design. They always turn out to be very simple, but very ingenious. And Perhaps you've seen the solution to the cake cutting problem because it's an example of ingenuity. So the idea is to have one of the children, say Bob, cut the cake in two, but to have the other child, Alice, decide which piece she takes for herself, and then Bob will get the other one. It's called the divide and choose method, and here's why it works. It works because when Bob is cutting the cake, he has a strong incentive to make sure that in his eyes the two pieces are exactly equal. Why? Because if one of them is bigger, he knows Alice is going to take that one, and he'll be stuck with the smaller piece. So he will make sure that he cuts the cake so that no matter which piece Alice takes, he's happy with the other one. So Bob is happy, and Alice is happy because she gets to choose her favorite piece. And that's all there is to it. So very, very simple, very simple solution to this perplexing problem of achieving a fair division. Now, you may say, well, this is such a simple problem, why do we care about it? It's simple, but it's already rich enough to illustrate some of the important features of mechanism design. First, as I've been emphasizing, the mechanism designer herself, the mother, doesn't have critical information needed to identify the right outcome. She doesn't know how the children see the cake. So she has to proceed indirectly through a mechanism. In this case, it was the divide and choose mechanism. But there's a complication, which is that the children, Bob and Alice, don't necessarily share the mother's goals. The mother wants to achieve a fair division. Bob and Alice don't care about a fair division. They just want as much cake as they can possibly get. So their objectives are at least in partial conflict with the mother. And that means that she has to take into account the possible conflict of objectives when she puts in place a mechanism. Okay, so that's a simple example to illustrate mechanism design. Let's look at one more example, a little bit more complicated, and also perhaps more important on a global scale, because what I'm going to talk about now is the privatization of the radio spectrum. Starting about 20 years ago, many countries around the world decided that it no longer made sense for the government to control the broadcasting spectrum because there were starting to be so many private uses for this spectrum. This was the beginning of the telecom revolution, where telecom companies could use the spectrum for mobile phones, for satellite TV, for all of the many wonders of the modern age. And so it no longer was efficient for the government to hold on to the spectrum. It wanted to allocate the spectrum to telecom companies who were going to make better use of it. So let's look at an example of this. Imagine now that you're a government and there's a particular band of spectrum of radio frequencies that you want to transmit to the private sector. You want to sell the right to use these frequencies to one of a number of telecom companies who are interested in using this spectrum. I'll call the right to use this spectrum a license. So there are a number of telecom companies competing for this license. And your goal as the government is to put the license in the hands of the company that values the license the most. because that company is likely to create the most value for society. So, to use a term from economics, we want an efficient allocation of the license. We want it to go to the company that actually values it the most. Now, the problem is that you as the government don't know which company values it the most. You could ask them, you could go around and ask companies, how much do you value it? And then give it to the company that says it values it the most. But you can see that this is probably not going to work very well as a mechanism, because if companies understand that their chance of getting the mechanism is improved by quoting a higher value, well, then they've got a strong incentive to exaggerate. And if all of the companies are exaggerating, the government won't actually find out which company really does value the license the most. So that mechanism's not going to work very well. The government could try something a little bit more sophisticated. It could have each company make a bid for the license. A bid is a statement of how much you're willing to pay. And then it could award the license to the company that makes the highest bid and have the winner pay its bid. This is called an auction. More specifically, it's called a first price auction, because the winner is paying the highest or first price that is bid. And it's better than the first mechanism. Now companies no longer have an incentive to exaggerate. But this mechanism won't work either. And the reason it won't work is because now companies have an incentive to understate, to bid less than the license is worth to them. And it's easy to see why. Suppose you're a telecom company and the license is worth 10 million to you. Well, are you going to bid 10 million? No, because if you did bid 10 million and you won, you would be getting a license worth 10 million, but you'd be paying 10 million, and so your net profits, your net benefit would be zero. You might as well have not participated at all. So you're going to bid less than 10 million. You might bid 8 million. And the problem is that if all of the companies are underbidding, bidding less than their values, then once again, the government doesn't really know which company values it the most. And at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, is there a mechanism that gets it exactly right? The first mechanism led to overbidding, to exaggerating on the upper side. The second mechanism led to underbidding, bidding less than the true value. Is there a mechanism in which companies have the incentive to bid what it's exactly worth to them? And it turns out that the answer to that is yes. And once again, it's an amazingly simple solution, but it was only discovered about 50 years ago. It was discovered by the American economist William Vickrey, and I think you'll like it because it's really very ingenious. And here's how it works. Once again, companies should make a bid, a statement of how much they're willing to pay. And once again, the winner is the company that makes the highest bid. But now, instead of paying its own bid, the winner pays the second highest bid. So this is sometimes called the second price mechanism, or it's called the Vickrey mechanism. And here's an example. Suppose there are three bids. One bids 10 million, one bids 8 million, one bids 5 million. Well, the winner is the 10 million bidder, because that's the highest, but the winner only pays 8 million, because that's the second highest. Now, I claim that now a company has no incentive to understate, because it doesn't even pay its own bid. Understating is never going to reduce the amount it pays. If it's worth 10 million to you and you bid 9 million, well, if the second highest bid is 8 million, you're going to pay 8 million either way. So there's no advantage to underbidding. And furthermore, if you do underbid, you run the risk of losing the license altogether. If it's worth 10 million to you and you bid 7 million, you'll lose if someone else has bid 8 million. And you'll regret losing, because if you had bid what it was really worth to you, 10 million, you would have won, and you would have had a nice 2 million profits. So it's a very bad thing to underbid. You don't want to underbid, but you also don't want to overbid. If it's worth 10 million to you, you don't want to bid 12 million, because now you run the risk that someone else will bid 11 million. You'll win if someone bids 11 million, because 12 is higher than 11, but you don't want to win because you have to pay 11 million, and that's too much. It's only worth 10 million to you. So under this second price mechanism, you don't want to underbid, you don't want to overbid, you want to bid exactly what the license is worth to you. And so all the companies will bid exactly what the license is worth to that company, and the winner will be the company that really does value the license the most, and the problem is solved. This Vickrey mechanism was at the heart of the mechanisms that have actually been used throughout the world for allocating spectrum to telecom companies. So it's not only beautiful and ingenious in a theoretical sense, but it has had an enormous practical effect as well. Well, I've shown you two little examples of mechanism design. I could spend the whole day here giving you other examples, but I won't do that because you have better things to do. But let me just mention two potential applications, two other important applications, actually three. One is to designing a treaty which will solve climate change. A treaty is a mechanism in the same sense that a second price auction is a mechanism, or divide and choose is a mechanism. Finding the right mechanism for solving climate change is one of the biggest challenges that mechanism design theory faces today. So that's an application. Another application is to financial crises. We know from painful experience that financial markets don't always operate very well on their own. They have to be regulated. But a system of regulations is a mechanism. How do we design a mechanism which prevents financial crises from happening and still encourages growth and innovation? And then finally, if some of you are possibly interested in attending the conference this afternoon, I'm going to show you how mechanism design can improve the design of presidential elections. You're very welcome to come, but in any case, I'd like to thank you for your attention this morning.
Dear Professor Maskin, thank you so much for this lesson. It was an excellent lesson of economics, but a lesson of life in the same time, explaining to us a little bit what means mechanism of design. We understood how a simple matter could be complicated and how a complicated problem could be simple in the same time. Simplicity was and is classical. In any case, we wish you to spend excellent moments and days in this city, in this country, the country of Dracula. You will notice that Dracula is missing for the moment, but the traces of Middle Ages are everywhere. This is a bless and at the same time a burden for us, but we hope to be able to manage and to do always simple and clever things as you were able to do, and to show the humanity how to manage this planet. Thank you so much.